Hello and welcome to Newsclick. In past 10 days, there has been a lot of debate going on the issue of nationalism. To discuss the issue, we have with us Gautam Navlakha, civil rights activist and a writer. Hello Gautam, welcome to Newsclick.
Thank you, Pranjal.
In last 10 days, there has been a wide range of debate on various issues and anchors are branding people as terrorists. Whatever has happened in JNU, people have raised slogans. As a civil rights activist, what's your stand on that?
In any democratic republic and which we are one, and a constitutional republic at that, the question of nationalism gets when it is posed, it becomes like an invitation to take either or position. I think we have to steer away from that and look at it historically. I mean, if nationalism is a historical phenomena, which it is, then we have to also therefore accept that as a political identity, it has to do with our sentiments. It's at the level of feelings, emotion that it exists. What is more important is, therefore, to think in terms of, because even the nations, the primary element that comprises the nation are people. It's better to talk in terms of people that who are citizens of India. And as citizens, when we look upon it, the question of if you are a citizen, question of your loyalty and disloyalty ought not to be raised. But let's move away from that. Let's look at it in a different context. There were some slogans that were shouted against Afzal Guru's hanging, calling it a judicial murder, in favor of Kashmir's Azadi and its right to self-determination, including there were slogans apparently shouted by some people calling for Hindustan's Barbadi or its dismemberment. I think at the level of slogans, we never take slogans very seriously. I mean, in a gathering, when the workers are striking, when people are agitated, when Kisans come out and protest, when forest dwellers come out and fight for their agitation, all kind of slogans shouted, some good, some in poor taste. But nevertheless, slogans are shouted. And I think we should leave it at that level. If there are some slogans which are distasteful, okay, what it calls for, nothing beyond chastisement or criticism, that this is not something which is very effective, which will take you very far with whatever you're trying to say. I think it should be left at that level because it doesn't behove anything beyond that. Therefore, we come to the most important issue, that why is it some slogans become so important in this context where it triggers off a debate or an attempt at creating a debate over who's a nationalist and who's not. And I think that is the issue. And that's what brings me to the single most important issue that I think that glares at us. The entire sequence of events that have taken place in Delhi, the manner in which we have so far been criticizing mildly or sporadically and pointing out to Delhi police's clumsy ways, its partisan ways, its hooliganism or its protection of hooligans. We've seen it for so many years. I'm not talking through my hat. I'm talking to you as a democratic rights activist and a member of PUDR, which has been working in this city for last more than 38 years. It's based on our experience, our observations, our investigations and fact findings. So if you look at it, Delhi police's bias, prejudice has been long known. Kerala House was a recent attempt. You remember what happened in 2012 when the women, children, kids were attacked by the Delhi police, and the then police commissioner called it collateral damage. Even when the women were dragged out with male policemen as an act of their machoism, he called it collateral damage. Mr. Basi belongs to the same, flock. The difference now is that the central government which is in power today is headed by pracharaks, and even our home minister is a pracharak, and he's turned out that he is not home minister of the country, he's home minister for Sangh Parivar. So his home is which is what he is interested in looking after, and the sequence of events that have unfolded in Delhi, where lawlessness prevails, gundas run amok, they are recognized, they are known, and the police does nothing, comes out with excuses, but elementary things like preventive arrest of these people after the first incident on Monday, they never even talk about. And in the middle of all this, we discover that this entirety of this campaign was based on a fake video. Other thing I would like to point out is that in the course of this, multiple questions are posed to us also. For instance, as a democratic rights activist, I am very often confronted with this issue that you're talking about human rights violations and atrocities in Northeast, in Nagaland, Manipur, Assam, in central 9 states of central India, where anti-Maoist operations are going, or Jammu and Kashmir, and they collapse the soldiers fighting on the border, or at Siachen with the soldiers who are waging war against our own people in the country, and ask, how can you be critical that this is not nationalism, that you're being disloyal, that you are siding with the terrorists, etc., etc. And I think we have to pause and ask ourselves a question. What is it that must go into the making of us as an Indian? If a police force, say, in Delhi, uses brute force against peaceful demonstrators, we condemn them, right? Similarly, if in a disturbed area, where Armed Forces Special Powers Act exists, and where security forces enjoy legal immunity, and therefore you have hardly any cases where security forces personnel have been accused of grievous atrocities, from rape, torture, killing to earn reward, kill for promotion, or kill primarily out of bestiality, that, you know, as a bestial act to terrorize the civilian population, etc., etc. All these issues therefore have to be posed to us, that how do we respond to it, and when we critique them, do we become anti-nationals?
Gautam, actually, when you talk about this entire concept of nationalism, and recently the MHRD minister has come out with a bizarre suggestion that the central universities should have flag at 207 feet masts. I mean, is this the concept of nationalism that we are moving towards, that holding a flag will be sign of nationalism? Like the lawyers who had beaten the journalists outside the court, they were also holding a flag, but they also equally shouted abusive things to the journalists and to the media and to the other students. So I mean, what nationalism are we heading towards?
Well, Manusmriti Irani, as she is now commonly called, there are two levels at which to. Of course, flag is very important. Flag is important for not just country, for parties, for people, anywhere. Red flag is very dear to all communists of all shades of opinion. So, of course, flag is important. And therefore, I mean, Tiranga is something which is part of our freedom struggle, and the Constituent Assembly is settled on the colors, and so we are very proud of it. Yes. Having said that, let's look at the way in which flag has been used in this country. It has been used to score a point or to beat the other. Now, I ask you, how would you respond to this? That a person can use a flag to beat, as we saw in the streets of Delhi. We have seen it often everywhere. This is the trick that ABVP, particularly Bajrang Dal's ABVP, Vishwa Hindu Parishad, all these flunkies from which belong to the Sangh Parivar, use again and again. So, when the minister of this government, which belongs to this party and this Sangh Parivar, comes out with this idea of flag, my response is a two level. One is RSS has never accepted Tiranga. So, der aaye durust aaye. Second, it just shows their hypocrisy and the political use or exploitation of the flag for their own purpose.
Gautam, also when we see at the entire issue, there are two prime focuses that we have. One is arrest of Kanhaiya, and the second is Umar Khalid, the person who has not been found by the police yet. There is a continuous attempt at pointing him out as a terrorist when he has yet not been arrested, or there is no trial which has taken place, and nobody seems to talk about the other 10 students who have also been dropped from the university, and maybe if they are arrested, sedition charges may be placed on them also.
Yes, that's a very it's a very disturbing question also. Is there an attempt at making a distinction between Kanhaiya and others, and to create some kind of a divide and shift the focus away from the larger issue, which Kanhaiya's arrest and this witch hunt for these boys actually implies? I think these are questions that we have to ask of ourselves. Absolutely. Let's take, it's a good thing, but I'm not entirely in despair. I think it's a sign of maturity that in the rally there were people who spoke up for these boys. The resolution or the charter that had been adopted by the marchers spoke of their rights and their protection, and for dropping the fake charges against them. So it's not as if they're being ignored. What is being done by a section of the media doesn't represent actually the view of the entirety of intelligentsia. There is an attempt at whipping up and creating a divide. We have to guard against that. Now, why do I say that? Let's start with Umar Khalid's. Umar Khalid's case as his father has pointed out, it's number 7 on the list of names. He was not the main convener, so why is he being singled out? It's pretty obvious, because his name is Umar Khalid. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that the threat faced by others is any less. So let's not make that mistake. All of them face the same threat. I would in fact argue, as a democratic rights activist, having seen the lawlessness that prevails, having seen that Kanhaiya, who was in the national glare, despite that and in the custody of the police, could be dragged out, beaten, who was beaten and abused. My point is that in such a climate where you are not sure whether a person is safe, even in the custody of Delhi police, which has become so partisan, I would actually argue that if they have not surfaced or they have not submitted themselves before the law, it's primarily because they fear for their life. In fact, I fear for their life. I am not sure if their lives are safe in the hands of Delhi police. I am not at all convinced of it. In fact, I would argue that given these conditions, unless this ends, unless the rule of law is restored, and unless we can be assured that a person in police custody would not be harmed, I think it would be an act of irresponsibility on our part to demand that these people submit themselves before law, because the law has failed, and the rule of law and those tasked with the protection of rule of law have failed to uphold rule of law. So I dare say, as a democratic rights activist, we can't be irresponsible on this. But there is a larger issue, quite apart from the immediacy of the issue. Senior lawyers, jurists, retired judges, scholars of high repute, public intellectuals who enjoy tremendous credibility in the public domain, all have come out with one voice to say that shouting slogans, even against the country, is not sedition. quite apart from sedition, it should not be treated as any criminal or any crime. It's at a level which just requires, if anything, chastisement, not punishment.
Gautam, when we talk about all these things, there's an important point that is being missed by the media, that even if the slogans were shouted, that also represents a voice from a section of the society or a section of the country that has been pushed, that has been marginalized since years, be it the Northeast or be it Kashmir. There is a gross human rights violation there which is happening. The rifled men are standing outside each and every house. So they also have a right to express that.
In fact, that is the most important thing about the slogans. It's what lies behind the slogans that we have to ask. Why is it that people feel disgruntled? Why is it they feel so? What has that caused them to utter those words? That is what we should be asking ourselves. And in fact, that brings your question is absolutely apt. It must bring us to pose those questions, to ask ourselves, why is it that we have not been outraged, that we have not stood in solidarity with people when they have been attacked, they have been vilified, they have been maligned, they have been brutalized for years after years. And now, when they get an opportunity to come and be amongst us and to share what befell them, and they shout slogans, we completely distort that. Instead of seeing it as an attempt at trying to start a discourse, a dialogue, a discussion, a debate, we turn it against them to try and shut them up. This will not do. It's a remarkable fallout of JNU on the other side. I mean, one should also look at the bright side. The bright side of all this is, for the first time in Kashmir, and I've been actively associated with and monitoring and with Kashmir issue. So I can talk with confidence when I say that in Kashmir today, there is now a possibility of building solidarity across, where Indians and Kashmiris can start dialoguing, discussing, debating, understanding each other. And I think that because it's high time we start asking ourselves a question and not get very outraged over things like demand for right of self-determination. It is the most peaceful democratic way of resolving intractable disputes. If somebody thinks it's foul, I think it's for them to decide why they feel it. But its virtue, its value cannot be taken away from it in the context in which we find ourselves in Kashmir. So I think it's high time we start looking at the issues that lie behind the slogans. It's like when a worker is fighting against the owner of capital and agitating for his right to either form a trade union or for wage hike or for assurance or for greater freedom at the shop floor level and against very strict monitored discipline, etc., and denounces the capital and things like that, and calls for his satyanash and things like that. We always pause to ask ourselves a question: why are the workers so angry? We don't go out and say, we can't come out and say, no, remove them from the street because it's a law and order problem, that it's a public nuisance and things like that. The right wing can continue to say it, but we don't say it. Therefore, we must ask, just as we ask ourselves a question, and we see these agitations as a mark of protest, of a social discontent. Similarly, these slogans also demand that we treat them as a manifestation of a much larger problem that we have ignored, not just of Jammu and Kashmir, but also of Northeast, of the 9 states where anti-Naxal operations are going on. And as I speak, in Jagdalpur, the police and the goons are conniving and trying to throw away anyone who speaks up against atrocities that are being committed, and gang rapes and rapes that have been committed by the security forces in Jagdalpur.
Gautam, it would bring me to my last question. I mean, you spoke about it before also, that there's a design behind the entire thing. The central government, the entire central government ministry has involved in the university matter, hurting the autonomy of the university also. So what's that design? I mean, where is this government heading towards?
I don't know how their game plan will unfold, given that they are also meeting a tremendous amount of resistance, and this will show what their actual game plan is. But I suspect that this was not just a series of accidents or one person's mistakes that have compounded problem. No. Rohit was not an accident. It was not a coincidence. That Rohit committed suicide is a different thing. But creating the climate like that to shut him up, that has been attempted again and again by them. I feel that the attack on JNU, see, so far they have attacked, where Rohit was concerned, the Dalits, the Muslims, Akhlaq and everybody. Kashmir, we know it from the ABVP's attack on Kashmiris is legendary. Bajrang Dal, ABVP have been known to be flaunting their muscles against the Kashmiris anywhere. But Delhi happens to be seen and always been seen as a left liberal bastion. You see, the left hegemony of JNU is a remarkable affirmation of what left hegemony actually means in real terms, its democratic essence. I mean, this whole tradition of discussion, debate, deliberation, argument is something that has never collapsed into a law and order problem or hooliganism, ever. It's a remarkable tradition, which means this is something which is most distasteful to RSS, because this means that the message or the strength of the left, unless it is weakened where it is strongest, it's where from they get their intellectual inputs, it's an attempt at silencing that. Our biggest strength is a capacity to come together despite our differences and fight back. Our biggest weakness is that when we come together, it doesn't leave behind a tradition of democratic behavior within us, amongst ourselves. And I think that's very, very important. There is something to be said about a different way in which we engage in our debate and discussion. I think the polemical style of debating, we're trying to run each other down or to become more self-righteous than the other, is not going to get us. If we are all, despite our differences where we come from, if we all subscribe to the view that in the final analysis, in the first analysis, what we have to do is to create an ambience, that we work towards creating left hegemony. I think that objective, if we all share within ourselves, then I guess we will be able to evolve a practice of living with our differences, and actually be able to provide the kind of alternative that is slowly coming on the shoulders of the left to take on. And we can't shirk that.
That's a very positive note to leave on, Gautam, and as the things proceed, we'll be coming back to you on these issues. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pranjal.
Thank you for watching Newsclick.